Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Professor Rai Winslow. And Rai is Director of Life Sciences and Medical Research at the Roux Institute at Northeastern University in the US. And we will speak today about the subject of computational medicine. Hi, Rai. First question for you today is, what is computational medicine and how does one get into this area of research?
Hi, Patricia. My colleagues and I have thought a lot about a succinct definition of computational medicine, and we've come on the three things that we do that define computational medicine. The first is to build computational models of biological systems in disease and health. And the reason for that is that biological systems, in our opinion, are just so complex that the only way they can be really understood is by developing models. The second thing we do is understand what we can measure in patients to constrain those models and make them patient-specific. This is a really fascinating question and area of activity because we are still fairly limited in what we can measure in real patients. Third thing we do, of course, is to take that model and harness it to make improved healthcare decisions on behalf of that patient.
That's very interesting, and I'm sure we will have a lot of questions around that from our audience. But maybe, Rai, you could tell us first about your own research at the Roux Institute and how your research has evolved over the years.
So I joined the Roux because it's a fabulous place, very committed to translation. And I think we are at a phase now in computational medicine where we've kind of done an existence proof of the value of models. And now it's time to put those models into action and deliver improved patient care. So that's what my research is about. I work in two areas. One is developing computational models that allow us to really understand the biological basis and mechanism of disease, and those models are applied to drug discovery and regenerative medicine and designing new, better therapeutics. And the second area of research is predictive analytics, taking data from patients, quantifying their state, and making forward predictions about where they're headed so that if need be, caregivers can intervene to help those patients and prevent negative outcomes from even occurring.
Super. And so I suppose, to get more into the detail now about predictive analytics and more, I suppose, provocative questions for you from me first, before we let you get the audience questions. But will predictive analytics and artificial intelligence, will they bring about the end of medicine, the end of healthcare as we know it? Would we have hybrid data scientists, AI clinicians in the future?
I think this is a wonderful question, a fascinating question. I don't think machine learning and artificial intelligence will bring about the end of medicine as we know it, but they're certainly going to change medicine, and you see that happening already. Machine learning and artificial intelligence offer the possibility of continuous monitoring, intelligent monitoring of patients, with the possibility of making forward predictions and feeding back those predictions to caregivers so that they can intervene to help those patients. And I view those kinds of interventions and recommendations as just that, recommendations, another piece of data that is provided to caregivers to inform their own thinking about how to help the patient. Ultimately, we may also make recommendations about precisely how to treat patients. But again, those are recommendations to caregivers, just like a lactate test done on a blood sample would provide a measurement that informs the thinking of a caregiver about how to treat that patient. I have a colleague here at the Roux, Sama Fayed, who likes the expression and coined it, humans in the loop in AI. And I see humans, caregivers, as always being in the loop. And what we're doing with AI is simply trying to provide new kinds of information and insights to caregivers to help them make better decisions. And that means that caregivers of all kinds, certainly physicians, will need to be trained differently for this coming era of medicine. They will need to understand more about AI and machine learning, and they will need to be able to pick up a paper in a journal of medicine and read it and critique it just the same way that they can pick up a paper today that's on a clinical trial or on a deep biological study of disease mechanism and understand it and critique it and derive from it what is important for their practice. They will need to be trained to be able to do that kind of critical evaluation of papers that apply AI and machine learning to healthcare. And so in that sense, we'll be developing new hybrid physicians. Some of them may also very well be doing leading edge research in AI and machine learning, without a doubt.
Fantastic. And I'm sure, Ray, there'll be so many questions on that. So please don't forget to submit your questions by the Q&A chat function at the bottom of the screen. But my last question, Ray, before we open it up to the audience was, as a world leader in the area of computational medicine, and dare I say it, you are the father of computational medicine, what are the most interesting or most exciting developments in computational medicine that you are currently following?
I think the most exciting thing for me to see is the impact that AI and machine learning is already having in areas of critical care medicine. I think it is enabling critical care medicine to be continuous, proactive rather than reactive. And in some sense, it's addressing issues of equity and accessibility to quality care in medicine, because computational approaches can be delivered in both urban and rural care areas of this country and help address rural disparities and access to healthcare. But I'm really excited by what I see as the next decade of applications of machine learning and AI in critical care medicine to help treat patients more effectively and save lives and produce improved outcomes in patients.
Fantastic, Ray. And there's so many questions coming in. So please do submit your questions. But the ones that I've seen already are, will humans, so you mentioned human in the loop. Will humans always be in the loop? Will I have a robot ever by my bed?
I think humans are always going to be in the loop. I think of AI and ML approaches as just providing new kinds of data, new kinds of information for the humans in the loop to consider, whether they're a physician or nurses or technicians or charge nurses. These are just bits of information that they will synthesize to make improved decisions about patient care. I don't ever want to discount the intuition and understanding and experience of caregivers. I simply want to amplify it and enable it even more through AI and ML methods.
Absolutely. And as I suppose personally, I always say, give the care providers more time to care by giving them the right information at the right time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Some more questions for you. How do you see technology impacting the way we diagnose and treat diseases in the future?
Yeah. I think it's going to fine-tune our diagnosis of disease. I have a specific example I'd like to cite. We developed an algorithm that looked at data from patients with sepsis and predicted those patients with sepsis who would make a transition to septic shock. And on average, that algorithm provided about an 8-hour early warning of the impending nature of septic shock. And one interesting aspect of the prediction was that the risk score for septic shock that we computed changed very, very quickly and abruptly and remained high for that entire 8-hour period on average before these patients transitioned into a condition that was clinically diagnosed as septic shock. I think the event that we predicted was actually the septic shock event. And so I think of that as kind of a computational discovery, a new kind of computationally derived definition, if you will, or diagnosis of what septic shock is. So I think that's going to change. AI and ML will change how we diagnose disease and help refine it. And recommender systems like reinforcement learning are already being used to look at thousands and thousands and thousands of patient records and to derive and learn from those records optimal treatment policies for different conditions. And so this is a kind of AI that might ultimately find its way to making specific care recommendations to caregivers as well as diagnoses.
So that's so incredibly interesting, Ray. And I just got a question for you based on that. So in terms of the sepsis, and you're saying 8 hours you can see changes, maybe before we can see them, you know, our clinicians can actually see them. And is that so? So diagnosis is almost after the event right now. And basically, you're saying with computational medicine, you can actually predict.
That's exactly right. We would show data to physicians at the time of the event that the AI method detected, the physiologic data from the patients. And they would look at it and say, you know, there's nothing here that would have struck me, that would have caused me to say, this patient is in septic shock. And yet the way it happens intuitively is an algorithm takes these coincidence small events and combines them in some strong and powerful nonlinear way to produce a robust signature of what we're trying to find that isn't obvious to caregivers at the time it happens, but the algorithm can find these signatures, and it's built to find these signatures in a robust and refined way.
So there's a lot of questions coming in, but somebody has asked, this is exceptionally interesting, and they're saying at a very high level, what were those inputs? Were they continuous inputs, Ray? Were they discontinuous inputs? What were the inputs?
Two kinds of inputs, all real time, but two kinds of inputs. One is what are called vital signs data that are captured from patients in virtually every hospital in the world at minute to maybe 5-minute intervals. And so these are things like average heart rate, average respiratory rate, body temperature, and so forth. So that's one kind of data that comes in at regular, relatively short intervals. Another kind of data were data in the electronic medical record, which is vast. There are many different variables. And so one of the properties of these algorithms is that you can provide them large numbers of variables, and there are principled strategies for pruning out those that aren't informative while retaining those that are informative. And so one of the most informative variable of all, and is why I used it as an example, was blood lactate. That was the #1 predictor of risk of septic shock. And then other variables like the Glasgow Coma score and sequential organ failure assessment scores and blood pressures were also in the top 10 lists, so to speak. But the power of many AI algorithms is that you can pull out these most informative features from a much larger set and rank order them by their importance. And that rank ordering it's kind of giving us clues about what the mechanisms of disease really are. It said that there's something metabolically happening with these patients. Lactate is the predictor. It's the top predictor. And so you learn something from the rank ordering of these clinical features.
That's just so fascinating to me as a biochemist, that lactate would have come up with the top feature. So many questions, right? And I just want to make sure we get through them because we're unfortunately running a bit out of time. But so here's a slightly long one, bear with me. You mentioned assessment of AI machine learning as a medical intervention. What do you think needs to happen to improve the reporting of AI ML based trials? Can we learn from the pitfalls of previous medical RCTs have suffered from?
Wow. So there is a major issue, if I can say that, in whether or not algorithms should be regulated as medical devices. The FDA here in the US has recently announced that they plan to recommend that algorithms be regulated as medical devices, and there is a reason for this. I'm not going to mention the company that created the algorithm. There is a sepsis prediction algorithm out there that has been deployed at many clinical sites because it's easy to deploy at those sites. It's part of the electronic medical records system. And a recent JAMA article reported how poorly this algorithm worked in a multi-center clinical trial. So poorly that it functioned essentially no better than a random fair coin toss. And so, rightly so, the FDA was concerned, and it and others issues caused them to begin thinking about the need to regulate medical device the algorithms as medical devices. So this is an important emerging aspect of clinical trials, but there's a second very important aspect here, and it's the fact that this algorithm failed in a multi-center clinical trial, a huge translational barrier and challenge right now is the fact that data from different hospitals, different locations, they're from different patient populations. I don't believe that it's possible to publish an algorithm with a set of parameters learned on a set of data that will generalize to everywhere. And so I think an important aspect of trials is appreciating this and understanding that the approach to learning that algorithm can be disseminated, but that algorithms may need to be learned on the region's particular patient population. They will always work best when trained on that data. So the way I think we need to deploy algorithms for and evaluate them in multiple centers, and of course that's the goal, is to deploy platforms that learn from the data that is being collected from the patient demographics being served in that particular hospital system. I think these are a couple of major challenges on the pathway to translation.
Huge challenges ahead. I couldn't agree. And getting over that chasm of getting things even into the hospital, even then when you get there to actually make them work in different hospitals. But I suppose just to finish, and we are completely running out of time, but just to finish, I suppose in the last 30 seconds, why are you excited for the future of computational medicine? What excites you, Ray? What are we going to see in the next 10 years?
I think we're going to see an amazing new approach to medicine that really improves patient care in significant ways, that gives us sufficient early warnings of what's happening to patients, what may be happening to patients, that interventions can be taken to prevent those bad things from happening. I think we're going to save lives. I think we're going to improve quality of outcomes. It's hard to know how this will impact on cost of patient care. It's a very, I'm not smart enough to make that a priori prediction. There are scenarios where early predictions might result in increased cost of care. And so it's difficult to know, but I think AI and ML are a clear pathway to improving patient care and providing new kinds of information to caregivers, of all kinds of caregivers, to make improved decisions. Imagine a charge nurse who knows that within the next 24 to 48 hours, they are going to have 5 really sick patients in their unit. Maybe they need to bring in additional caregivers to help those patients. That act alone is an act that could help improve the quality of care and outcomes in that particular unit, let alone the direct interventions made by physicians.
It's incredible, Ray. And unfortunately, we are completely out of time, but I firmly agree with you. AI will absolutely save lives in the future. It's just so exciting to be involved. And just unfortunately, we are completely out of time, and sincere apologies to all of those whose questions I didn't get to. I just want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to Professor Rai Winslow for the most fascinating discussion today, Ray. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Patricia, and all your colleagues. Thank you.
And thank you so much to everyone for joining in. This is the first in our new series focused on the impact of technology on our health. So please do check out our website for our list of upcoming speakers, and we will see you all very soon on our next HIT series. Thank you so much.